Welcome everybody to another edition of MOYATalks. Today we have Moya's own Omayra Martinez, and we welcome her to this special series in which we're going to cover Moya as an organization in our fourth birthday. Welcome, Omayra.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Very excited and kind of nervous to see, as I mentioned at the beginning, what can I bring to the table and share with you that will be like researchful.
It'll be interesting. Don't worry, I'm sure about it. All right, Omayra, tell us a little bit more about your background in Puerto Rico and your work in the island.
I started my career in Puerto Rico back in 2004 in an advertising agency. It was a very renowned. It is a very renowned advertising agency, and sorry, this. I'm just listening to the conversation here. Right off college, and I was there for 8 years pretty much, and I kind of managed a lot of governments and private clients as well. Um, and my former boss in Puerto Rico is still my friend. Is my mentor. Is a person that it's very important in my life because kind of like um, opened the path for me back in Puerto Rico.
And where in Puerto Rico are you from?
Which part? Salinas, the
Which
south.
part of Puerto Rico?
Yeah, it's by the Caribbean Sea, like the coast. Yes.
Cool. Right. Omayra, in 2010, you moved to DC and you started working at CBS Radio.
hmm
What surprised you the most about life in the district?
Well, moving here, when I moved here, I had a lot of expectations at the beginning. Certainly, me coming from Puerto Rico, I was thinking like it would be very easy, to the fact that it's like moving to mainland, but it's like any other immigrant completely. My expectations were completely different when I got here, starting with the weather, coming from 80 degrees on a daily basis, and then getting here to, 10 degrees. It was 2009 with that big snow snowstorm. Transportation, no car, English barrier. So it was kind of a hike at the beginning. And then I always remember my first 2, 3 months, I started crying and crying. I was missing my friends, and then I was whining like a kid. And then my brother in the house was like, this is not the sister I grew up with. It's up to you. I can, send you back to Puerto Rico immediately if you don't want to do this life. But um, I know you can do better. I know you have the strength, and you're a natural hustler because we grew up together. And I want to give you 24 hours to make the decision. And then tomorrow we talk again. And the next day I was like realizing that I was complaining too much, and I completely changed my mind, and it's been 13 years already, and I don't regret it. But yeah, it was a hike at the beginning, like any other immigrant.
How important was the Puerto Rican community in helping you realize the opportunities you had there?
Well, I always said this when I'm talking to friends, and they ask about that because when they want to support you, your family, your friends are there in your island, but they don't realize then that sometimes it's a damage for the first year, or 2 years, or something like that. Because when they call you during Christmas, they call you to wish you the best, and how are you doing, and all love, right? But at the same time, when you're at like 10 degrees, not surrounded by family, by your parents or anything, it's kind of it's complicated, and then you start missing, and you start having all those second thoughts of getting back, and they don't realize that because they are born and raised in the island, of course. But it's hard when they call at the beginning. When they were calling at the beginning, I was like, oh my god, I missed them so much, but I don't want to cry in front of them or anything like that. So um at the end of the day, you grew up as a woman, as a human, and you mature, and you said, there's better opportunities and more things to do here, and it's a cycle to complete in US.
Nice. I see some faces nodding, completely relating to the experience.
Yeah, more beyond being Latinos as an immigrant overall, like I think it's the same experience for all of us.
Especially because Latino families are very familiar, right?
And
You got a
attached,
lot of
correct,
people. At
correct,
CBS,
correct.
you work in the WLCL station. also
Hmm.
called El Sol,
Uh-huh.
right? It has
1079.
a wide Latino audience.
Correct.
And I wanted to ask you about the role radio broadcast has in the Latino community.
The impact? You mean the impact?
Yes.
Um, well, I don't know in any case with all of you in your particular countries and all of that, but in Puerto Rico we have a lot of radio stations, a lot of TV stations, and here when I moved and I started working in media, which was my background, um, it was so shocking for me just find or found two TV stations, which is Telemundo and Univision, and only two FM stations in a huge or large Hispanic community market. Not certainly not compared with New York, Miami, Chicago, or any other market that are primary markets in terms of U.S. Hispanics. But definitely was a huge community for just two FM bands radio stations. So um, for me was very interesting finding a way to get that opportunity to work with them, um, and it was very interesting the way we were communicating all the time, informing. The most relevant part dealing with radio and the Hispanic community on a mass media level is that you have the ability to inform, you have the ability to provide resources to them in our own language. Sometimes there's a lot of like language barrier in our own community with blue collars and stuff like that, and that opportunity while I was doing my work to inform and provide resources when they didn't have anything um, to do their things. They need someone to rely in Spanish, and that was the radio station, that resource, that platform for them to to have that sense of integration and sense of engagement with our own community.
So, with such a big market and only two stations, must be
Hmm.
huge what El Sol means to the community.
Of course, yes. Yes. Back in days, there were like other two stations. One of the stations went off the market, which was La Mega, and then it was also and the 87.7 La Nueva. So basically, those two radio stations up to date. Me being in that industry for so many years, I heard so many conversations of Univision Radio, SBS coming to the market as they are in other markets, but that's not happening yet. Still, DC, unbelievable, being a Hispanic, a very Hispanic affluent market doesn't have more than two FM radio stations. But that's the reality of DC.
And you mentioned, is there a divide between blue collar workers, white collars in their use of the radio?
Yes, I can tell the pattern. It's 70-30, 75-25 blue collar audience, 25 um, white collar audience within Latinos.
And in terms of what you produce, what people consume, is it more similar to what a radio station would do in Puerto Rico, for example, or more similar to the States?
In terms of the content,
Yes.
completely different. And I'm pretty sure in our countries in Latin America as well. Here, because we are regulated mostly by the FCC, Puerto Rico as well, a little bit, but it's kind of more open in terms of regulations. Here, with the FCC regulations in terms of all media outlets, Hispanic, non-Hispanic general market, the clocks they call clocks. Um, it's very limited in terms of content. It's basically 3-4 segments of 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then the rest is pretty much music and commercials. In our countries in Puerto Rico, you can listening to a radio station and a morning show, and they are talking for 12 minutes non-stop about a particular topic, no problem. And I'm pretty sure it's the same in Mexico and Salvador, Colombia, Argentina, in all those places. You can have a block for 10 minutes talks, um, and that doesn't happen here.
Right.
Money
Interesting,
doesn't let
interesting.
that happen because the clients and the music industry and all that.
Require this quick turnaround.
Yeah.
After working in radio, you moved to TV
Hmm.
and you work at Entravision WFDC, which is Univision owned. and
Mm-hmm.
you joined in 2012, right?
Correct.
And when you joined, like, I found this interesting because that was the year they launched Buenos Dias SC, the
Mm-hmm.
first Spanish morning news
Mm-hmm.
in the Washington area. Can you tell us a little bit about your work there and how you feel?
You did your research, Rodrigo. You did
Of
your
course.
research. Yeah, so I joined Univision, actually Entravision, because this market is the affiliated with the network. And that year we were like trying to do something else beyond the sales perspective and the marketing, just more than ads with clients and stuff like that. And we decided collectively between the programming department, marketing, and sales department, why we don't do a morning show like Despierta America or all this like Today Show and all that concept for the local market. And we were the first response from network was no, and we were like, well, we have the clients that they are willing to start like buying space, airtime for them, and doing segments and cooking segments and all that. And it was a back and forward until we convinced upper management in Miami to make it work, and we had that show for like almost 2 3 years. It was a very good show, great ratings, great numbers, um, good sales. But then unfortunately our um, news director, who was in charge of managing that show, she was promoted to a position in Miami. She left DC, and then all things changes after that, and Buenos Dias DC, it was like no, not um, in the station anymore. But it was a great experience to make it happen.
Is there another show like that now? Or is
No, it
not
was the
covered?
no, it was the first Hispanic local TV show in a network here locally. We developed it, and the idea was to keep the show. But right now, there's nothing else. Anything you see right now locally in terms of Telemundo and Univision, it's network, and locally it's just the local news. More than that, there's no local content. Which again, as getting back to what I mentioned at the beginning, being DC, the nation's capital, it will be very nice to see more content, more local content, because we are the most affluent Latinos across U.S. This particular market is the most affluent Latinos across U.S. Maybe not primarily like the other five, but yes, affluent, and we don't have that content, that relevant content.
And you have a lot of representatives and senators who are of Latino origins too.
Correct,
So it's
correct,
politically relevant,
correct.
right? During your time in Entravision, besides working on these projects, you also work in the Hispanic telethon,
Hmm.
right? Could you tell us about that project and how it developed into a model for other markets?
Yeah, I always call that project as my baby, one of my biggest babies, because I was very attached to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. That's kind of like one of my causes, my personal causes. And then I had the opportunity to work with them since 2011 when I was in radio. And then St. Jude, they do a lot of radiothons, general market, and Hispanic as well. And across US, they do 150 radiothons for fundraising purposes. And I collaborated in a lot of those radiothons in the market during in the past. And then when I moved to Univision, my first question, keeping that relationship with them, was like, where's the other telethons? What we don't, where's the other telethons to, to start doing, to use that model and use it here in DC? And the response was like, there's no Hispanic telethon with St. Jude yet. It was like, how is that possible? So again, it was the same process, the creative process, and my mind that sometimes is very creative and it's always thinking in different ideas, particularly in that sense. And I was like, well, let's start putting together like a plan to have a Peloton. And we pitched it again to the upper management in Miami, and they say no because they didn't want to sacrifice República Deportiva and all those shows that nobody sees over the weekend. And and it was like two
Sábado
no's
Gigante.
from the yes, correct, correct. So um, and we pushed, and then we said, I talked to my general manager in the station, and I say, well, if they say no to interrupt the programming, why wouldn't do the commercial breaks with the local clients? We talk to the local clients and we use those commercial breaks from 12 to 6, which is an hour of airtime. And we just do whatever we can with an hour airtime to collect money for them. It's better than zero, right? So we went back to Miami and they say finally, okay, go with the commercial breaks, do whatever you want. And then we did it and we raised in an hour airtime like $80,000, $80,000, which was crazy for an hour time. Um, and that set up the model of today to use that format in different U.S. Hispanic markets, minorities, but they are using it. The idea is to keep growing, and the feeling for me is pretty much when I have my completely white hair, I say, okay, that's happening, and I put a little bit of like of something there for those
Yeah,
kids that they need it.
I'm a bit fascinated by the logistics of this. How do you set up the time for the telethon? How do you convince people to come and perform?
Well, but during that time, I was in the marketing and the sales department, so I had my own responsibilities dealing with my own clients, their airtime, their contracts, and all that. So I had to deal with that. And basically, this was like something that we were doing in our same hours from the heart. And it was a lot of coordination from upper management in Miami, all the approvals, traffic, because they need to adjust the entire log for that particular weekend, finding the clients to justify those, to give you a number, those $50,000 that we were taking out of the books because all those clients that regularly were booking during the weekend, I had the challenge of not making anybody look bad. And okay, we were originally making $50,000, and now with the telethon in terms of sales, because it's a business transaction at the end of the day, we cannot go back and say, well, we got $25,000 in sales for the
Mhm.
Telethon. We had to surpass. So we were eight on the sales and marketing department by then, and we just crushed it. We just crushed it. We did 120, um, because it wasn't our heart. We were just rocking the streets and killing all those like dealers, advertising agencies, everyone finding those dollars to make it work. A lot of logistic and a lot of stress, but very rewarding.
Congrats, congrats. You more
Yeah.
recently worked at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts.
Hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, because it's a different beast, right? You are working more on hospitality sector and event planning.
Hmm.
What's the market for events and services of this type, performing arts, in the Latino community in DC?
Very rare. That's one of the things that I always have talked with people that I have the opportunity to talk, because there's a lot of Hispanic events, um, not particularly in DC. When I'm talking like 10,000 people, 7,000 people, for example, main concerts for Latino main concerts are in Virginia, in the Eagle Bank Arena, most of them. Latinos, they don't use often Capital One Arena for the concerts. You can see like very, very renowned ones, but in general terms, Latinos have more visibility in terms of events in the suburbs, like Gettysburg, Rockville, Silver Spring, um, Fairfax and stuff like that. Um, and that's one of the things that I personally think should change, because there's a lot of like involvement with the Latino community and the business Latino community in DC, but you don't see like a taste of DC that you see all Pennsylvania Avenue, with this diversity of cultures and foods and integrations, and you don't see that in our community more than Fiesta DC, which is not a it's a third of what Taste of DC represents. Um, and personally, I would like to see more of that. Those kind of events, social and cultural events for our community in the district. That would be very, very nice, to the level that I was personally seeing at the Kennedy Center, like the galas, like the cocktails, receptions, intermissions, and all those kind of things. You can see that in DC, but mostly in the business community, not
Mhm.
in general.
Right, Omayra, you joined Moya a couple of months ago. It seems like a year now, but it's been a couple of months.
2 months.
and you have led the transition to Moya's news office. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about the process.
The process is being amazing. Um, I think I never had the opportunity to be involved in a commercial transaction. So for me, a lot of things were kind of new. Um, but it's been hectic, but at the same time very exciting. Because I know everybody's like looking forward for to have a new office space, like the new Moya. Generally speaking, I think everybody in this company is amazing and um, very like the sense of integration and the empathy. It's 10 out of 10. I'm saying it totally from my heart. Um, and that makes it's been making that process of the new building and the transition and acquiring very, very easy. I know for Paola as well, it's very exciting process. It's a baby, and it's like when you're buying your own house, you have a lot of stress and tension and a lot of elements and dots to connect. But at the end of the day, you know that it's for a very rewarding end line, and that's the way I see it, the way I feel it.
Excellent. Before opening the floor, one last question. Where do
Sure.
you see Moya going in 2022?
Wow. I see Moya growing exponentially, not only in the local market, but more into the national and international level. I think more international opportunities will come up to the plate. I think we will have more visibility and recognition in the local market with the new office. Um, and across the board, I think all of us um, we will be back into a new space. We will be back. At least the local team will be in our own space, and that will make things a little different. I think, and I truly believe. Um, I think it's affirmed with the research that I did when I started with that actually was growing very fast at the beginning and now it's growing more and more. And 2022, what I'm seeing, it's exponentially. I'm seeing more the international level on all the conversations that I am and business development meetings and marketing. Um, a lot of potential for this company.
Great. So let's open the floor and let's see if the people have questions for you.
I
Okay.
do. Omaira, you always are on the other side of the microphone. How is Rodrigo doing as an interviewer?
Oh, he's doing amazing. He's
Ah,
doing amazing. Though we were just talking about that at the beginning of the conversation, because I was a little nervous. Because usually I like to interview other people, and you feel comfortable with the questions, right? But this is the other side, and it was a little like a little stress on my side. But he's been amazing. Thank you very much.
and a follow-up question. During your interviews, have you had any like hiccup moments where maybe the person that you're interviewing, I don't know, says a foul language and it's in public or like something funny that may perhaps you're really like, oh no, let's go to commercials now.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of that, especially with artists and stuff like that. Um, well, sometimes that they have their management teams and all those kind of entourage as we call it. But they are like Muppets. You have to be here what time you have to be, and sometimes they are there, and sometimes they don't realize what time it is, and if they can do 20 interviews and they don't care, they forget about the FCC regulations. And I've seen in positions where like they have said bad words. Top of my mind, it's Bernard Hopkins, the boxer. We interviewed him, and it was like something that he was doing in DC, and we had the opportunity to interview the guy, and he said a bad word because it's his nature. It was on his nature. And we were like, boom, we were like, just send it to commercials immediately because you know, you don't have that break. We have a blessing in radio that a lot of people don't know. We have 20 to 25
Delay,
seconds
yes.
delay, correct. which means that if something happened, you just drop it and go to the next thing you have in your clock or in your programming system, and nobody hear that, which is an advantage. So we had to press that button, which we call it the red button a lot of times.
Rodrigo, do you have that button?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Everything is in real time.
Exactly.
So I have a quick question. Now that we have that radio talk show type experience in Moya, when are we starting our own podcast? Moya
Oh,
This
podcast.
is on a podcast,
paola. Eso
Fede.
es
You
paola.
can listen to this on a podcast.
Well, funny that you mentioned that because one of the things that the marketing team has brought to ideas is right now they're in concept design. If for the architecture team, they're right now in concept design, but they're following closely to go to the schematic design. But they're going to want to do maybe some actual formal podcast at the new office
Yep.
where they could actually bring people over and have some interviews. So stay tuned.
Be very, very, very interesting to do that and support.
Any more questions?
I have
Uh,
one.
yeah.
Go ahead, Christina.
De nada.
Renata,
Yeah.
sorry.
The trivia winner. The trivia winner.
Yay. So, how come did life take you to an architecture firm?
Well, those are the things that it's not necessarily because of the pandemic. I think it's the U.S. life that reinvents you. I like in an easy way. I kind of step out from the media life because with all the social media changed the traditional media platform. So all those um, social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, changed traditional media for good in terms of sales, numbers, budget, everything. And I saw that coming in 2014, and then that's when in 2017 I started making a transition into other things that at that time for me was like, okay, the next thing that I want to do is event planning, and that's how I got into the Kennedy Center and all those like big arenas in the market, like Nationals, DC United, and all those big venues. And how I got here, basically with the background in operations that I had from those big arenas. Um, Paola and I connected, and that's how all the conversation started. And for me, it's very interesting because I feel like I'm getting back into my first job in Puerto Rico in the advertising agency when I see where I see everything from an outside perspective, but everybody it's working very tight in their own projects, and it's like advertising translated into buildings and concrete and spaces, but that creative sense and creative mindset, it's there, and I love it. I love the way that I'm supporting all of you in any capacity that I'm doing it in a very quiet way.
Omayra, would you relocate back to the island now after 13 years?
Oh, don't ask that question, or no. The answer is no. Not for now. Not for now.
Tongue in
Yes.
cheek.
No.
Not for now. Let's see
Well,
it.
Mary, it's been wonderful having the opportunity to interview you.
Thank
I
you.
hope you enjoy the interview as much as we did.
Yes,
Thank you,
I did.
everyone, for another Moya Talks. And let's see you next week.
All right. Very nice speaking
Thank
and
you,
seeing all of
everyone.
you.
Happy
Bye bye.
Friday, everyone.
Bye bye.
Everyone.
Have a
Have a
great
great
week.
Goodbye.
weekend. Thank you for
Bye.
listening to me.
Gracias.
Bye.
Gracias.
Bye.